Hi, this is some editorial notes. During this interview, there were some crazy sounds going on, and part of it was due to my own devices, but like I stated, but another part that influenced it was some unknown interference. I don't know what it was. Um, I mean, we were talking about aliens, so obviously I chose to keep those in just because, just for the record, I chose to keep those in. Okay, well, I guess we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining me in southern Utah, having a great time. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Marilynn Hughes is with us, and we're very happy to have her here. Thank you, Marilynn.
You're welcome. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure. All right, so I'm here. Marilynn is in Colorado, and I'm way out in southern Utah in the mountains. So I hope everybody can catch in very well. Very happy to have you joining in and watching. We'll get started. Marilynn, I've listened to some of your audiobooks, and I was very impressed by some of the mysticism that you have in there. Very interesting things. Let me ask you, have you ever come in contact with any extraterrestrials?
Yes, many races of extraterrestrials. So I have some of which I'll just list a few, and several races of extraterrestrials that I don't know where they are from, because there's a lot of them that we don't know. But in terms of the ones that are identifiable, the Pleiadians, the Greys, the Arcturians, the Alpha Centaurians, let me think here. But there's several races beyond them, which are the ones that are really highly spiritually evolved, who come from star systems which are of a higher vibrational frequency than all the rest. And I have no idea where they're from, because they are really, really far out. They come from very deep space and from worlds so far beyond our own that we can't even fathom them. They're very amazing to come across, because when you do, you're experiencing a vibration that is so far advanced beyond us that just coming in contact with them is an educational experience. Just experiencing their vibration is something that catapults you into an understanding of what is possible for the spiritual advancement of energy, of humanity, of what can be, what we can become. It's really a beautiful thing.
Wonderful. What other high beneficial extraterrestrial races are there, other than that, that you already mentioned? And
Well,
are there ones that are smart enough to leave us alone, but are yet trying to help us at the same time?
there are, I guess I wouldn't put it in those terms. The ones that are very highly spiritually advanced and spiritually evolved are, it wouldn't even be, are they smart enough? It would be their wisdom, their knowledge is so far beyond our own that they have an understanding of what is within the thrust of God's will for his creation. And so they would assist in our evolution, and they would do so within the context of God's will. And therefore, they would not interfere in ways which would be hard or not helpful to humanity. And they are the ones that we are less likely to have a great deal of awareness of. They will keep themselves hidden. They do their work very quietly, vibrationally, beneath the surface, so to speak. People will have very, very faint reminiscences of them, if any at all, because they will shield themselves from our memory, because their work is highly dynamically subconscious.
Okay.
They are not going to be seeking our attention or our awareness of them. They would be working on the actual energetic construct of the human soul and working towards helping us to achieve higher and higher thrusts. And so those would be very subtle. And we're not going to achieve anything close to what they have become in a human lifetime, because what they are is literally light years, thought years beyond, millions and millions and millions and billions beyond the human evolutionary spectrum. So what they're going to be doing is giving us little tiny light seeds, and the amount of evolutionary thrust that we can attain to in this lifetime from it is minuscule in terms of the movement forward. We're not going to become what they are or even be able to fathom what they are. We can't even come close. What we might do is, if we are sitting here, we might be able to move here, but they still remain all the way beyond, out there in a world so far beyond our consciousness ability to even understand them. It's something that the human mind has trouble actually comprehending. And so they work within the will of God. So it has nothing to do with them being smart enough. It has to do with them being evolved enough to be working within the construct of the will of God for his creation. Okay. So when you're talking about like these other races that might be closer to mortal beings, beings that might be more similar to us in their evolutionary thrust, like the Greys or even the reptilians or other beings like these, where they are not anywhere close to as advanced as these either, they are going to be much more likely to have some of the same vices that human beings might have. So that's where you see the battles between good and evil going on within those races as well.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. What do you know about the Anunnaki, the Elohim, the Pleiadians, and yeah, are you familiar with those terms?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Anunnaki, the Elohim. I could not hear the third and beyond.
The Pleiadians.
Oh, the Pleiadians. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the Pleiadians. So I'm very familiar with the theories of Zecharia Sitchin on the Anunnaki and the Elohim. Yes. I have not had a great deal of mystical experience about them, but I do believe that there is a great deal of mystery and import that goes into what these theories portend, in terms of that the Anunnaki were possibly here pre-Sumerian civilization, and possibly had something to do with seeding human life on this planet. But since I haven't had any mystical experiences about it, I cannot say much more. The one mystical experience I did have about it, I was encouraged to read the writings of Zecharia Sitchin, but I was told that it was important to have it in balance, because it's not the whole story, because he has some of it right, but he takes it too far. Whereas in Sitchin's theories, he thinks that all of these encounters in the biblical era, in whether it's biblical texts or other ancient texts like the Srimad Bhagavatam or other texts of, the ancient Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, or whatever, that they must be extraterrestrial. That's just simply not true. Some of these cases are extraterrestrials, but others are actually celestial visitations from angelic or spiritual emissaries of light or darkness from the mystical realms. And so Zecharia Sitchin, as brilliant as he was, did have a tendency to think that everything had to be extraterrestrial. And
Yes.
then, you know, some people will then go the other extreme where everything has to be mystical. So everything has to be either angels or demons, you know, whereas some theorists you'll hear say, well, extraterrestrials must be demons, right? So you hear the opposite thrown out. The reality is, no, there are both. There are both extraterrestrials, and there are angels and demons, and there are celestial visitors. You know, there is a mystical world, and there is this extraterrestrial universal world that we have that has been going on all around us. We have a big universe going on. And so it's both. So in terms of that, what I would say is take these theories and understand that they are part and parcel of something much bigger. In terms of the Pleiadians, the experience that I've had with them, I wrote about in great detail in The Mysteries of the Redemption, a treatise on out-of-body travel and mysticism. They are a civilization of love. They exist on this emanation of unconditional love. So they are very different and set apart from like what you would experience with the Greys or the reptilians, who are mortal beings who have elements of good and evil. The Pleiadians actually are a bit more of a civilization that has gone more towards the immortal energies. They're not karmic elements within them. They are ascending. So they are a higher thrust. So they are very, very powerful. And powerful, when I say powerful, I don't mean powerful in the worldly sense of powerful. I mean powerful in the love that they emanate to us when they come to assist. They have put a lot of energy towards the assistance of this planet, and they also come to certain souls on this planet to assist them in their own individual spiritual evolution. But their goal is to help souls to realize that unity, that oneness of all life within us, excuse me, which is one of the elements of our basic spiritual understanding that humanity needs to grasp and understand in the spiritual journey in the very beginning, because it's something that is just an elementary spiritual lesson that has to occur in every human life.
And what are
So
some instances of them helping us that you...
I'm sorry, you're going to have to repeat that. I could not hear that question.
What are some instances of them helping out humans, the Pleiadians?
They were very involved before the Second Iraq War. They were very, very, very involved. They were very close to the earth. They were trying to prevent the descent of our planet into this now 2 decades long war that we are in now. So many of the events that led up to that time, they were very, very close to the earth. I remember having profound, very beautiful experiences where the motherships had come in very close, and the ships were coming in. They were trying to bring in resonance vibrations to see if something could be done to prevent certain things from happening. I think that they had more of an understanding of what it would mean than any of us certainly did, as to, you know, this really, you know, really long, decades long war that, you know, everyone at the time, I was, you know, I would have been, you know, in my 30s at the time, we all thought it was going to be a quick thing, you know, and I think they understood otherwise, apparently, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And that it would have, you know, it would have lasting impact on our society, on our human development, on our world. They were trying very, very desperately to prevent it. Another thing that I've had with the Pleiadians, many human beings do come from the Pleiades. Many human beings have extraterrestrial origins. I mean, when I say that, it doesn't necessarily, there are people who do have, you know, hybrid qualities. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about is our spiritual affinities, meaning, you know, in between our lifetimes or in other lifetimes, we have spent time in certain systems, in certain areas, just like if you've had a lot of lifetimes as a Native American or a lot of lifetimes in Africa or in Europe, you're going to have an affinity to that place. There are many of us who have certain affinities to certain star systems or planetary systems. I personally had one to the Pleiades. So I had a lot of contact with the Pleiadians and was given a lot of instruction from the Pleiadians. But another thing that I was shown that was really, really beautiful was that Jesus came from the Pleiades, and so did our Blessed Mother. I had this beautiful experience, and it was shortly before the Second Iraq War, when I was watching the motherships were hovering in very close, and they were showing what they were doing to try to prevent this war that was imminent. And they brought in the ships coming in lower and lower, and this holy being was coming in to the earth to and they were going to let me see this person, this being. And this person was brought down from below the ship, beamed down, so to speak, and all these throngs of spirits and souls wanted to see her. She was so beautiful. They called her Our Lady in Light. At the time, I didn't know who that was. You can all guess, I'm sure, because I kind of gave it away already. But it was such a profound moment when I went up to her. She was wearing these deep purple robes with white and a golden gilded crown. And I was like, I went up to her and I was like, oh my gosh, you're the Blessed Mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary. And I realized this very holy Pleiadian woman was the Blessed Virgin Mary. And it was just a mind-blowing moment, because I had already been told years before that Christ had come from the Pleiades. And, you know, and since that time I had also, you know, like 10, 15 years later, after those experiences, found out about the writings of Billy Meyer and the ancient text that he had discovered, which talks about how both Jesus and Mary and the angel Gabriel had all come from the Pleiades. So that was an interesting correlation for me as well, to see that years later. I think the text was titled something like Emmanuel, but I'd have to check. It's in the other room. So the Pleiadians had a lot to do with that time. And once that war started, they had to pull way back. So I have not seen nearly as much of them since that time. Up until that time, they were greatly involved in trying to help assist with this shift that was hopefully going to come in. But as a result of many of the choices we made as a human species, they had to pull back. And so I consider that very tragic indeed.
I see. Do you ever come across any ideas of those that have maybe dragon DNA? Do people on this earth have dragon DNA?
I have read about those scenarios, but I have never received anything mystically about it. I think it's very interesting, and I've researched it a little bit, but that's about the extent of it in terms of what I've received. So I really can't comment on it any more than that. It's a very fascinating little area of research, however.
The theory goes that people were eating lizards and things, and then they would eat the plants that the lizards ate as well, and then it would seep into kind of their ancestral DNA or something like that. I don't know, it's pretty out there.
Actually, the theory is very different from that. The theory goes back to, and I'll just give the basics of it, very basics of it, because it is very in depth. It goes back to the royal bloodlines, and actually it goes back to a royal bloodline which is theorized to go back to the time of Christ and before, to the line of the kings from the time of King David and all the way through the patriarchs of the Old Testament. And the dragon DNA is said to have been a particular type of bloodline that came from an earlier race of men who were the fairies, the people who had certain magical abilities. And one among the theories is that some of these people may have actually been of alien DNA, possibly have been planted here from, this would go again back to the Anunnaki possible theories as well. But yes, it's a very involved theory. It would be impossible to actually, unfold the whole thing right here. But it goes back to the idea of this bloodline that goes back through some of the royal bloodlines, the royal families, ironically, primarily of Europe. But I think it goes throughout the world, having this origin that goes back through the line of Christ and the line of the Davidic kings and the line of the patriarchs, and all the way back to possibly these magical beings who then are theorized as possibly having been brought to Earth by either Anunnaki or other extraterrestrials for the very purpose of creating a royal bloodline, a dragon line of people who would have special gifts, who could assist in the evolutionary capacities of the human race throughout time. And so that's actually what the dragon theories are about regarding the dragon DNA.
Wonderful. Fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's very fascinating, very involved.
Why do some people accuse the Elohim of mining the planet for its gold? What's your perspective on that?
Oh, the reason for that is because there's a reasonable expectation that they might have done so. The if the Elohim is not the celestial beings, if the Elohim are actually and so we're talking about them from two different standpoints. If the Elohim are extraterrestrials, this is where the accusations would come from. It would be because in the coming from the Zecharia Sitchin theory, when the 12th planet in the solar system blew up, the only way to balance out all of the things that got thrown out of disorder, and I'm not going to be able to explain it in more detail. You'd have to have a scientist come on and do this. I've listened to scientists who have explained this and who would do so much better than me. But you needed the gold to actually replenish the atmospheres that had been destroyed by these actual atomic wars. It was gold that would restore the atmospheric balances in those civilizations. So that is why they would have been accused of that, because it would make sense that they may have actually needed it to try to do what they were trying to do. Because the reason they would have actually come to this planet, the theory of the Anunnaki is they came here because the 12th planet blew up. The asteroid belt is theorized to be the 12th planet that was destroyed either by an internal war or by some celestial event. And they came here to try to reseed another planet so that life would not be lost. And that they actually created humankind originally to be a slave species, to mine the ore, to mine the gold, to do the things that they needed to have done to try to restore the things that they were trying to restore. That's what the original theories come from. So that's why they would accuse them of that. And all of these things come from, and they're not accusations, they're more just archaeological, suppositions based on, cave writings. Cave writings is not exactly the right word because they have ziggurats, they have tablets. They have all of these different things that we have the ancient Sumerian writings on, and all the things that Sitchin, analyzed, and other archaeologists who are, astronaut theorists, ancient astronaut theorists, who have come to these conclusions, have done so based on these ancient sacred writings and images, hieroglyphs, which show the slave race that they were building to mine the ancient ore, and the things that they were actually doing. And so their theories, rather than accusations, their theories of this is what it looks like they were doing. They could be right, they could be wrong. But when you're looking at a civilization that occurred such a long time ago, theories are necessary when you're trying to decipher texts from such a long time ago, images from such a long time ago, when the historical record has been lost.
Okay, that's it. Very interesting. Wonderful. Do any extraterrestrials correspond with the zodiac signs? Like, could they maybe in the far distant past have helped Western astrology adapt and develop?
Let's see. We do know that many of the building sites correspond with Orion. We know that many of the building sites correspond with the Pleiades. So those are the big ones that we hear about, Orion and the Pleiades. All the ancient Egyptian monuments are done in alignment with the Pleiades. In terms of the other zodiac signs, I do believe that there is a correlation. I don't know the specifics of those offhand right now. I'd have to go look into my texts and stuff.
Okay. Okay. How can a person who does not have time for things like, oh yeah, in your books you've talked about mindfulness or finding meditation time.
Uh-huh.
How can someone who does not have time for it learn how to soul travel?
Well, you have to make the time.
Okay.
I'm going to just give you the hard answer, because even in the one of the things Emanuel Swedenborg, who's a 16th century mystic, talks about is how in the afterlife we go where we're compatible. We are where our heart and our loves take us, So we put our time and our energy and our passion towards the things that matter to us. We all have to work. We all have to do the things to take care of our families, our children, our parents, our daily needs and things like that. But what we do with whatever time remains, that's in our own hands. And so we have to decide what we're going to do with that time. And so if we want to have the opportunity to try to experience out-of-body travel or soul travel, we have to be willing to put that time and effort into it. It's not something that you just say, I'm just entitled to this happening for me. It's not like that. It's not like, okay, I'm just going to put a quarter in the slot machine and this is going to happen for me. This is something where you have to make an actual effort. You have to make a commitment to God. You have to put in the discipline, the prayer, the meditation, the time, the self-reflection. It is not a free ride, As much as I'd like to say there's an easy way, so far we don't have one, the way that the prophets, saints, mystics, sages, and ascetics from throughout the ages, from all time, who have written the ancient sacred texts, have done it from time immemorial, is the way we do it today, which is put in the time, you do the prayer, meditation, spiritual reading, and you have to give it the discipline.
Yeah.
It takes time. It takes that commitment.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. So can certain, okay, so what about like diet? Can certain diets help one to recall their experiences in soul travel?
I've never seen a correlation with that. Some people have said that works for them. For me, I have not seen that to be the case. Generally, just trying to keep a balanced diet. If I overdo it or if I pig out, I'm definitely going to notice. It's going to impact my travels or something.
I'm just
So
asking.
moderatings for sure.
A lot of people have stated that have acidity or a less base. So a more acidic diet will help somebody have increase their memory capacity. So they'll be able to
Having what kind of diet? Having what kind of diet?
a more acidic diet. So like
Acidic,
yeah. Uh-huh.
and that will help increase the memory.
Yeah, because it makes your body
Okay, well,
sick.
I don't know. I would not be able to comment one way or the other as to whether that would actually help or not help.
Okay.
I actually eat a lot of acidic foods. I can say that because I love citrus, and I live in Arizona right now, so I have
Yeah,
citrus
exactly.
trees. So I use a lot of citrus in my cooking. So I do like the acidic foods, and so maybe it does. But I lived in Colorado for many, many years, and so many years of travel, many decades of travel there and in other places where maybe I didn't have as much of the acidic. So I don't know that I can really say one way or another on that one. I haven't really tested that one out.
I see. Yes. Okay. Um, do you advocate or hold on. Um, so back to aliens. Can one receive an alien visitation in your
Can a person can a person receive an alien visitation?
yes.
Yes, that can happen, and it's happened to, I would say, millions of people around the world.
Okay. Do you advocate shamanic medicine in places where it is legal?
What kinds of medicine?
Shamanic medicine?
Shamanic medicine?
Yeah, do you advocate
Um,
it where it's legal to take?
um, I don't say I would advocate it. I don't know enough about it. I wouldn't say don't try it, but I would not ever advocate um, ignoring the use of modern medicine in the treatment of disease. I was very sick myself, and terminally ill at one point, and made a full recovery, miraculously so. And I was treated by modern medicine. So I'm a full believer in using both those methods of modern medicine along with things that are natural and otherwise. But I would never advocate to completely just throw out modern medicine. I don't think that's wise, personally.
Okay. How far back does soul travel go? How far back does soul travel go? Is there evidence in the Christian records that Adam and his children were mystical in this way?
Oh, well, what's interesting is that I wrote a book called The Primordial Seed. And in some of the ancient sacred texts, we actually have record of Adam was hearing the prayer, the prayer of the hours that the angels sang at the throne of God until the fall. And after the fall, he could no longer hear it, which actually tells us quite a bit about the power of the prayers of the hours in Judaism and in Catholicism, the liturgy of the hours. It tells us how powerful that prayer is in bringing us in alignment with the prayers of the angels at the throne of God in helping us to achieve out-of-body experiences. But But we have in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, all of these great revelations and visions. These are all, most of these things are out of body experiences that people are having. That's what we have. Wrote a book called Near Death and Out of Body Experiences, Auspicious Births and Deaths of the Prophets, Saints, Mystics, and Sages in World Religions, which goes through and shows you how the great revelations of every world religion and many of their saints were simply out of body experiences, which are not called that. And you'll see that religion was born of out of body experiences. It's dotted throughout our spiritual and religious history of humankind, all the way back to the very beginnings of Stone Age religion. You know, there's a great book, set of books. It's a 3-volume set, A History of Religious Ideas by Mircea Eliade, which, if you're interested in just understanding religion from the very beginning, literally Stone Age forward, and then the evolution of religious ideas from, you know, Hinduism till now, this is the guy to read, you know, because he will help you understand how these things formed, why, and where they are now. Out of body experiences is nothing new. It's the reason we have religions, you know, and it began, you know, it continued into, you know, the tribal traditions, the early shamanistic traditions that occurred all around the world. One of the things that you'll find if you study shamanism is that in the early shamanistic traditions around the world, you know, whether it was New Zealand, in the Americas, Hawaii Islands, European, Tibetan, the shamans of every culture in the beginning, even if they had no contact with each other, which as far as we know, they did not in those early times, their shamanistic practices were so similar that the only thing that we can concur is that they were touching into the same reality in their practice. Those witch doctors, you know, they call them witch doctors or shamans. I prefer shamans, but you know, in the early days they called them witch doctors, and they all did this same type of practice, and they ended up doing such similar practices in the very early stages of mankind in shamanistic healing that it's unprecedented in anthropological history that you can have the exact same practice in New Zealand and in the United States of America and a Native American shaman. And that's telling us something. Just like when you look at the mystics, whether they are Christian mystics, Jewish mystics, which would be the Kabbalists, or the Sufi mystics, which are Islamic mystics, or Hindu mystics, Buddhist mystics, all of these, when you have the differences of opinion in the religions themselves, the interesting thing is when you touch into the writings of their mystics, they agree on much more than they disagree on. So when the mystics unite in the world of spirit, something happens, which is they are touching into the same reality, and the disagreements fall away. And why that happens is because they're all touching into the same God. And so all of the ideas, the differentiations that we create, the structures that we create that make us feel like, no, 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 it's this way. No, 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 it's this way, fall away, because the unity that is God reveals himself.
Okay.
And
very interesting. Would there possibly be a first line after? So, could there be a like a first family name after Adam and Eve that became mystical? Like, if you laid it down, would there like be a certain name, like a certain lineage or something like that, that were like the or something? Yeah.
a certain holy name.
No, would there be a certain name that would be the first mystics? Like, after the first people, like after Adam and Eve. So like was
Oh,
like a certain lineage that's mystical. Yeah.
let's see. I mean, what we, in terms of, I'm not sure if I'll get the right ones, but, we do have the old Chaldean oracles. We have the oracles at Delphi. They weren't necessarily, these were not Jewish ones. The lineage in the Old Testament is Adam and Eve, you know, and so the lineage comes from Adam and Eve, and it starts primarily then with Abraham, who receives the vision of God, who tells him to leave the land of Canaan and go on and create the people of Israel. And he's literally then the first mystic uh, of the Jewish people at that time. But Adam was also a mystic in his own right. We see in some of these ancient texts and in the ancient mystical texts. So we see that these things run throughout these ancient stories. So that line, that lineage starts with, the very beginning with Adam and Eve. But in Judaism, it would probably begin with Abraham. That's why they call the people of the book, which would be Jews, Muslims, Christians, the Abrahamic religions, because Abraham is the father of those religions. But they do actually begin with Adam and Eve. But you also have like the Chaldean oracles. You have the oracle at Delphi. You have the ancient Egyptian mystery schools. You have a whole line of activity that was going on in ancient Egypt at this time with Hermes and Thoth and Nefertiti and all these things, much of which has been lost to us. We also have the mystery schools, the Greek Orphic mysteries. There were things that were going on, many things in the very beginnings, and there's more, So then you also have the Sumerian civilization. There's always more, because there's more that we've lost. And the Great Library of Alexandria would probably have shown us even more, because then, you have to also consider the lost continents of Atlantis and Lemuria, which were probably going to predate all of those things and were probably truly civilizations of mystics from what we know, from the little that we know. So my perception is that mysticism has been a part of human experience from the beginning, but we also know that the beginnings that we know of are not necessarily the only beginnings that there have been. There have been others. There may have been others that we know nothing about. And there have been events that have been erased from history that we don't know anything about as well. So there's so much more that we don't want to erase them more by not acknowledging that they may exist, the things that we do not know about anymore. You know what I mean? I had this beautiful vision recently, and part of the reason I'm saying this, I had a beautiful vision of ancient Egypt, and Nefertiti came forward, and I was seeing this beautiful holy thing coming forth from the land of Egypt, and everything was, gold, and all these pyramids, and there was a Nefertiti cult. And it was being conveyed to me that there was an old religion from that time that had been completely lost to us in our history, and it was very holy. And it was completely lost to us now. And it was important that I know that it had once existed. And it's interesting too, because Nefertiti and Akhenaten, her husband, did not reign for very long. They did not live for very long. So what's interesting about that is, if there was, they managed to do that in a very short period of time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see. So do you follow the Zodiac? And this is just food for thought. So if someone were a master at the ancient practice, if someone were a master at the ancient practice of astrology, Eastern or Western, as well as soul travel, could they like have some pretty amazing powers, like have total recall in terms of being able to predict things and like predict things eons in advance, for example, if they were able to like be a master of astrology and soul travel at the same time?
I wouldn't consider that uh, necessarily true, because being a
Because
master of
they could
astrology would
predict
be a
things in
separate
other
thing.
galaxies.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, they could see things happening in other galaxies and they could see how it affects this planet.
Well, being a master of astrology would be a separate thing. And so that would be one thing. And if
Yeah.
a person is a master of soul travel, that's another. So what, and the gift that you're speaking about of whether or not they can predict like Nostradamus events that are going to happen or whatever,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother gift. And
Yeah,
so,
like
just
2,000 or
just
500 years, like
yeah.
5,000.
So I mean, if someone's a master astrologer and they also have the gift of out of body travel, would
Yeah.
they absolutely have this third gift? Absolutely not. No. But could someone have this third gift?
Yeah.
Sure. But that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah,
We
they'd be
do see a
traveling to other
Nostradamus.
civilizations and
Yeah,
stuff.
Nostradamus had some type of gift like this. We've seen it
Yeah.
very rarely, so it does happen. But all in all, in the scenario you're presenting, I see that as two different gifts. Someone has cultivated their gift of astrology, and someone has cultivated their gift of out of body travel. They're two
Uh-huh.
separate gifts. Can they be utilized together? Probably, but no, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to just have some kind of other third gift. Can it happen? Sure, but
Yeah.
uh, you know, uh, no, it doesn't automatically guarantee they're going Damas or something like that. It's
Well,
just
they would be traveling
God
to other
chooses. God
galaxies.
chooses. Yes, we always want to remember here too. We want to remember all along in our searching. We're not looking for lofty gifts from God. We're looking to remain humble before God, because it is in
Okay.
our humility before God that we remain worthy to be taught. It is when we believe that we should be given these, remember the doctrine of the fall, that we wanted
Right.
to be
Right.
gods. So remember this and remember it well, because it is only when we stand before God humbly that we remain worthy to be taught. When we get to the point where we want this and we want to be able to see this and then we've lost the whole point of what we're doing. We want to stand humbly before God, asking that his will be revealed in us in his way, not in our own, not in our own.
Okay.
And all these things, they're great. Study the things you're drawn to, but do not do so with the intention of exalting yourself. Do it
Right.
with the intention of serving God alone. And then you will find your way safely and
Yeah.
effectively.
Safe.
Yes, and faithfully.
No, I'm totally unsafe 24/7. I don't practice. Do you believe that metaphysics should be taught in public schools as a study, like a curriculum? Metaphysics?
um, Probably not, just because the separation of church and state, then they'd have to teach everything
Okay.
else, so probably not.
Um, do you believe that there is a great awakening happening right now, worldwide?
Okay. Yeah, for some reason I'm just getting hot now. Arizona summer is definitely hitting.
Right? Finally.
Okay. Okay,
All right, continuing on
cool.
with the second half of the interview on
Hey.
Zodiac, soul travel, etc. Okay, so here's a really good question for you. I think that listeners will be fascinated. You listeners will be fascinated by this. It is, do you feel that there's a great awakening underway, worldwide, possibly?
Well, I think that there can always be a great awakening that's going on for individual souls. In terms on a greater scale, I think there's actually a little bit of a thrust going backwards,
Oh, okay.
which is what
Maybe
we're kind of fighting
selfishness?
against. Oh,
Selfish?
that's always part of it, because ironically, that's part of our purpose on earth, is to
Yeah.
work against our selfishness. In my near-death
Yeah.
experience in 2003, Jesus had told me that, our purpose on earth was to go from selfishness to selflessness. And so that's part of our work here on earth. But it's more than that. It's more of, this going towards this darker turn, and so all of those who are having this greater awakening that's going on are always kind of
Yes.
tasked with this bigger job, so to speak, of doing everything they can individually do to bring in as much of the light as they can, to make it as big of a thrust as they can. Because on the
Absolutely.
grander scale, there is always this mass retain that's trying to continue
Yeah.
pushing the regular agenda forward, so to speak.
Have you seen anything by chance on the Covenant in your mystical experiences? Like
Have
for
I seen what?
the Ark of the Covenant, for example, do you know what it is or what's inside of
Oh,
it?
of course. Yes.
Are
And
you sworn to
ironically,
secrecy?
um, the the Ark of the Covenant often presents itself in mystical experiences
Uh-huh.
in the way that it did in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament,
Yeah.
Moses would go into the tent, and the people would see the smoke in there with God, with Moses, which was the presence of God. And that is often how the Ark of the Covenant is presented in mystical experiences, where you see the smoke coming in of the presence of God. And so
Okay.
many people, when they have mystical experiences and they're experiencing something in relation to the Ark, that's how they're going to experience it. The smoke of God, the presence
Ah,
of God coming into a space.
I see. So if there is a great awakening happening or has happened, has started to happen, um, will it be interfered with by the dark ones, or whatever it talks about in the book of Revelations?
It's always being interfered with by the dark ones. There's
Yeah.
always the battle of the principalities and powers of good and evil going on all around us at all times, and so that's always happening. It's just it's the nature of
Okay.
mortal realms, and the earth is a mortal realm. It's the third and fourth dimension where the battles of good and evil go on inside of us and around us, and so this is always happening. So even what you'll find is that even when you start having a personal awakening, you're going to find that you will all of a sudden start undergoing spiritual warfare experiences. And some people are so freaked out by it because they're like, well, wait a minute, that never happened before. Why is this all of a sudden happening? It's like, well, because before you were comfortably numb, so to speak. You were not there was no threat to your position with the dark side. When you start awakening and you are now moving towards awakening and towards God, then they're going to fight for you. And so it becomes very uncomfortable because people have to decide, am I willing to go through this battle for my soul, so to speak? Am I willing to do the work of the purification, which is going to entail some of these things? And so absolutely, there is always a battle for this.
Wonderful. Does listening to the thing that opened people up via, say, lexicon wise, such as Shakespeare, for example, help people to recall their soul travels. So it's a question about if a person, so can you spark your memory, like can you improve your memory for mystical experiences by listening to Shakespeare, because it helps it helps widen your field of kind of um, what exists, because it improves your, you know, what amount it improves, it makes you more aware of more words, like, if that makes sense.
Listening to Shakespeare
Yeah.
probably won't help you at all,
Okay.
but reading and studying the ancient sacred texts, reading books like mine, which will also like create a map of the universe for you, those kinds of things will help. But
Okay.
reading ancient sacred texts, reading old mystical texts, new mystical texts, things that are excellent spiritual reading, reading mystical theology, things like that, those kinds of things will help you, and they will open you up, and they will actually accelerate, um, start the path of purification, which is what actually assists in your recall.
Do you prefer the term soul travel? In other words, could it be a more profound terminology for this divine human ability? So, is there a better
I,
for it than soul travel?
No, I don't prefer either of those words. I'm fine with,
Okay.
there's a lot of different words that people use, and I think they're all equally useful.
Okay. How familiar are you with the Taoist works such as the Tao Te Ching and the practice of Tai Chi and Qigong?
I'm very familiar with like the writings of Lao Tzu, so the Tao Te Ching, obviously, the all of that, but also the writings like Wen Tzu and some of the other writings of Lao Tzu,
Uh,
but also the writings of like the founder of Taoism, Lin Zai, the master Lin Zai.
uh,
I find him very fascinating because he actually
yes.
founded the system. Um, I am a little bit familiar with Qigong and Tai Chi, but I don't practice them
Uh,
physically, because they're physical practices as well. I
yes.
don't practice them physically.
Do you believe that Lao Tzu was familiar with soul travel? That he himself was familiar with it, or out of body
I
travel?
think it's very possible that he was, but it's impossible for me to know that for sure, because Taoism is a system of belief which doesn't require out of body travel to penetrate. Taoism is a system which allows a soul to, settle within its current manifestation and be in a state of contentment within it in order to achieve a state of enlightenment. And so he may have, and he may not have, or he may have um, experienced like transcendent states of being rather than out of body travel, or both. It's impossible to know that for sure.
Uh-huh.
I definitely think he did the transcendent states of being based on his writings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Do you believe that world peace between the East and the West can be established via an understanding of mysticism, and how so?
I think that what you have to understand is the nature of the realm.
Uh-huh.
So the nature of a mortal realm is where the battles between good and evil reside. I was told by the angels decades ago that I needed to surrender to the nature of this realm. I wanted to save a world which served its function to perfection. And sometimes what we do is we have this tendency to not want to accept that this is a transitory world which serves um, the the evolution of the soul, and it
Uh-huh.
serves many different levels of soul evolution. And so we have to be willing to sit back and allow God who understands the nature of this world and what it is doing for that purpose, and accept our own inability to comprehend that in our own human failing and frailty. And what we do is that we do what we are able in our own corner of the world, but accept that the nature of this realm is what it is.
Yes. Could it be that that mysticism is a global practice, therefore it would help out with world peace in general?
Well, it already does, and it always has, because those who are meditators, those who are mystics, are always working in the realms of energy to alter and transform energy, to change the thrusts that are coming in and out of the realm. So mystics are always working on world peace. They're also working on individual peace with souls, you know, individual souls and groups of souls. So that's always happening. The question, though, is whether or not you can achieve an entire state of peace in a world which was not designed for that function. That's the question. This world is a purgatorial realm. It is a realm of purification, the purification of negative constructs. So because of its nature, it may not be able to be that which those of us who are seeking for a higher construct may wish to achieve here. But what we can achieve is we are seeking for a higher construct. And we need to understand then that we seek that higher construct because then we will then transcend and ascend to a higher sphere, which is compatible to that when we end this life, when this life is complete, if we become compatible to it. Do you see? So that we cannot expect that we change the nature of this realm. We just become compatible to a different kind of realm, and then we naturally amend to that when we die.
Okay.
You see?
Yes. Very wonderful. Very good. Have you had any interactions with Merlin? And what is his origin?
With Merlin?
Yeah. Which ET race?
I have had interactions with Merlin, but they have been very few and far between, and I do not know his origins.
What happened after
but
Camelot
yes, I don't know. One of the things I was shown years ago about Camelot was that the story is different than we know, but that's not surprising because you know, history and mythology change things, you know what I mean, a little bit. And so we would have a slightly different historical record of that. In terms of who Merlin probably was during his time, he was probably more of what we would even see as a bit of a desert hermit. You know what I mean? Desert hermit who you know, ended up, you know, cultivating some of these talents and gifts in the woods, you know.
I see.
And then it became the gifts became
crafting
greater
magical
as
objects.
They were mythologized. Yes, yes. And then he as he was brought into the lives of the people in his time, then he may have had a different import in the life of Arthur and whatever, but the way that it was mythologized would have changed it a bit, but that's to be expected.
And back to the East and West question, or world peace. Do you advocate that young people, like after they finish high school or college, travel the world low budget? Like attempt to travel the world for free, basically. If you go.
I mean, I don't really, I mean, I can't really just say that I advocate for a whole bunch of
Yeah.
things. I don't really advocate for that or against
Yeah.
it. I mean, everyone has a
Would it help
different
with world peace?
reality.
Like if they went over
If they
to
all traveled
India?
the world,
Yeah, if they all
I
traveled
don't
to
know.
India or some of the mystical locations, or like Egypt or India or.
No, I'm not going
Okay.
to say I advocate for or against that. Everyone's
Okay.
situation is different. People
Yeah.
need to make their decisions based on what their economic and their educational requirements are in their own life, what their
Okay.
goals are, what their individual destinies are. I certainly cannot say that every young person should do exactly the same thing. No, I can't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So no, I wouldn't say
Yeah.
every person should do exactly the same thing, and I advocate that. No, what I
Okay.
would say is that, sure, I mean, there are a lot of people, including myself, who will never be
Hmm.
able to travel the world because it's not financially feasible. So
Yeah.
we don't want to make people feel like they have to find a way to do that.
Now
Some
you
some
could
people
do it
can't
by
do it because it's
road
not
or on a
physically
cattle boat.
feasible.
Yeah.
Well, it's irrelevant to the question of out of body travel. It's
Okay.
irrelevant to the question of out of body travel.
Okay.
So that's just what do you want to do with your life? And that's a question people take up with their families and with their own personal choice and destiny and what they're going to do.
Okay. Have you interacted with Joan of Arc, and what is her origin? Like, have you interacted with her on the other realms?
I don't recall having seen Joan of Arc in the mystical, but I am
Okay.
very, very interested in her. Yes.
Perhaps you have
I
and
mean,
don't remember.
she's a very interesting soul because of the fact
Yes.
that at a time when women were very, very in a very, very different situation, she
Uh-huh.
not only was a profound mystic, but she went into battle.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that she was
Mhm.
instructed to do that she actually pulled off were pretty profound. And so she's a very
Fascinating.
interesting, fascinating mystic that, yes, is just, you can't help but be very intrigued by her. And, that she was that on, she had the visions that she had, and she was
Yes.
so on
Yes.
fire for the goal of she had to get the French king back on the throne. And that,
Uh-huh.
this is someone where that something was inspiring her, that this had to happen for her.
Uh-huh.
And that usually is an indication that the Holy Spirit is really behind her, that
Yeah.
something here is going on. And she went through so much persecution as a
Mhm.
result of it. She completely succeeded in her mission, and they still burned her at the stake. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I mean, it's just crazy. And then she wasn't
It can
actually made
happen.
into a saint. Yeah, until like, 500 years later or something. And so she is a fascinating story.
Uh-huh. Does being in
Definitely one of the more
battlefields,
interesting one.
does being in battlefields cause you to be more likely to go into a mystical state?
In a battlefield,
Yes, in battlefield.
um,
Yes.
only in the sense that you might die or be close to death. Being in a battlefield is literally just a horde of evil and dark energy. So, not in any other sense. It would just be that you're going to die or be close to death, and so
Okay.
you may be thrust into a near death or a death experience. And so, no, definitely do not look at being in a battle as a good thing to induce any type of no, that would not be the case at all.
Okay.
That would not be a reason to be there by any means whatsoever. The reason to be there would be that you were inherently called there, that you felt that it was your calling and your mission to be on that field at that time. Like Joan of
Okay.
Arc, she knew that she
Yes.
was,
Perhaps
and there
it
are some who,
perpetuated the experiences. Maybe her being there in the battlefield perpetuated her experiences, perhaps.
No, it would, the battlefield would be irrelevant. What would be
Okay.
relevant in her case, this would be relevant in all cases. What would have been relevant would be that she would be obedient to whatever she had been directed to do.
Okay.
So whether it is, so like for instance, St. Catherine of Siena had to write down everything that she had been given and dictated to by God the Father. So in doing so, she's energizing further instruction. She and St. Bridget of Sweden had both been given directives to assist with popes in different eras who were not in Rome, to assist those popes in getting back to Rome because they didn't want to come back to Rome. So when they got involved in, again, another period of time where women were not really in a position to do so, and somehow they managed to have these profound influences on the popes at the time and get them to come back to Rome, when they were doing that and they were doing what they were particularly instructed to do,
Yes.
that would energize their further continuing experiences. So in Joan of Arc's case, if she were instructed that she needed to lead that battle, and she did so, then that would further energize her continuing instruction, just as any of these others, you know. So it's not the battle or being in the battle, it's the obedience to the particular instruction. Like in my case,
okay.
it's the obedience to write these books, give them away for free, make them downloadable for free, you know, all the little details that you are told to do. It's the obedience to those things that energizes the further instruction.
Okay.
It's not any of those things outside of the heavenly instruction. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
So any of those,
so
any
it builds
of those
upon
circumstances,
itself. When you
yes,
do one thing, it builds upon another. Sort of.
yes, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And it's when you're being obedient to what you were actually instructed to do, not that you're just like, oh, I think this would be a great idea, so I'm going to do it. It's no, it's when you are instructed, it's like, no, this over here seems like a great idea, but I have been instructed to do this. So
Yes.
this is what I'm doing. You see,
Yes,
there's the difference. And so, like, I'm sure that St. Joan of Arc leading the battle did not seem like a great idea at the time. It does now, you know, because we have the after, you know, the relevance of history to be able to say, well, yeah, of course, it was a great idea. At the time,
she certainly got a lot of people angry at the time.
Oh yeah, she sure did. I mean, they burned her at the stake, you know, but you know, at the time they were probably like, what are you thinking? Why would you think it's a good idea for a woman to lead us in battle? That sounds like the stupidest thing we've ever heard, you know, but she was being obedient to the instruction. And so it wasn't stupid because of that. If she had not received that instruction, it might have been really stupid. You know what I mean? But because she had received that instruction, it imbued it with the power of the Holy Spirit. You see?
Yeah.
It changes the nature of the interaction based on the fact that you are being obedient to the instruction as given by the will of God, versus just doing what, you know, oh, this sounds like a good idea to me. You know what I mean?
Yes. So what about Nostradamus? What's your opinion on him? Well, we talked a little bit about him. How about some more?
Well, I don't really like have an opinion on him, but I do think that he was obviously, at the time, you know, he was, you know, doing a lot of his stuff down in a secret little place. He obviously had some gifts as a seer, and he was also just a very deep theological and mystical thinker at the time. And he was given some type of prophetic gifts. And so he's a very profound figure in our prophetic history, you know.
Yes. Amazing. Amazing. Did you have anything else to add on that?
Well, you know, he is considered pretty significant in the mystery religions, you
Yes.
know, right alongside, you know, the Count Saint Germain and some of these others. And
Uh-huh.
and I think that that's where we look at the significance of some of these unusual people who kind of overlap. You know, they aren't
Yeah.
exactly Catholic, they're not exactly another religion, but they kind of overlap into the mystery religions. You know what I mean?
Yes. The
And
mystery
that's
schools
partly too, yeah,
as well.
mystery schools, and that's probably
Hmm.
too what you're trying to get into when you're talking about Shakespeare, because Shakespeare was kind of overlapping into some of the mystery schools as well. But
Yes.
you also have the you know, you have the Count Saint Germain, you have Saint Louis Claude, uh, what was his last name? There's a Saint Louis Claude something de Martin or something like that, who's another mystery saint. And there's others that are considered, Francis Bacon, you know, who kind of rode these lines, but are kind of held in the most high esteem under the mystery religion banner.
Ah,
And
yeah.
that's where Nostradamus, I think, carries his most significance, even though he was Catholic and he is a Catholic. And you know, the interesting thing, something you may not know about that I think is
Yeah.
fascinating, there is a document that was accredited to a different saint
Hmm.
that they've recently felt. It's the history of the popes, the prophecies
Okay.
of the popes, something like that. And it has to do with apocalyptic prophecies of the popes that lead to the 2030s, you know, coming times here. And they have recently come to the conclusion that Nostradamus was probably the author of that text too. And that came out of the Vatican Secret Archives, and it's one of the most
Ah,
utilized texts in that is utilized by people who are students of the apocalyptic end times type things, you know. So
I
there are
see.
some very interesting correlations between this text and some of the visions of Pope John the 23rd and some modern day mystics as to the things that we see coming in the next couple of decades in our world right now. So it's
Ah,
fascinating to see that, and
it
that
is,
this
yes.
document may have been falsely attributed to a very random and unknown saint because they wanted to hide that Nostradamus had actually written the text.
Ah, I see. How did they
Yeah,
go
interesting,
about
huh?
that? Yeah. All
Well,
right.
they titled it as being, you know, written to by this other saint. But what they were
Uh-huh.
able to do was do a bunch of textual comparisons and things like that, where they were able to determine that it was most likely Nostradamus who wrote it, who actually wrote
Okay.
it, because this other person they put the name on had not written anything, and the style of the writing and the nature of the predictions and things like that most closely fit with Nostradamus, and it was from his period of time when he was alive, which isn't a very, you know, a very wide window. You know, he wasn't alive that
No.
long.
No.
And so it's interesting that they tried to cover that up.
Yeah. Very
That's
interesting. Yeah.
an interesting recent discovery on the possible misappropriation of Nostradamus's work on the prophecies of the popes.
Yeah. So back to the Zodiac. We talked a little bit, or tried to talk a little bit about other extraterrestrial races from other areas. Um, what are some less known ones or less considered ones, and where exactly do they come from in the universe? Like what direction?
Well, I mean, there's literally hundreds of those, and um, they come from everywhere. you know.
How about some really important
Uh,
ones that most people don't think about?
Well, you know, I think, well, I don't know what people normally think about. You know, I don't know
Okay.
if people realize that the grays are generally considered to be coming from Zeta Reticuli in the
Ah,
Andromedan galaxy, and
see.
that they are actually portended to possibly be our descendants 30,000 and
Wow.
45,000 years in the future in a
Hmm.
post-apocalyptic Earth where we destroy our planet, and they are now on Zeta Reticuli in Andromeda, which is much too close to its sun, and their lifespan is only 30 years or so because it's too much radiation there.
Oh.
And
Hmm.
the reason that they are trying to visit here with us is that they are trying to alter the events that led to the destruction of life here on Earth. And they're losing
Wow.
the planet Earth 30,000 years in our future. I don't know if people
Fascinating.
are aware of that. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing. This comes from, you know, I work on a few boards that have to do with extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
And I learned this from some scientists who worked directly with some of the Zeta Reticuli.
Yeah.
And so very interesting. Not sure if, you know, not sure what to make of that, but it's very interesting. What can I say? You know, I
Yeah.
can't say that I know that to be true. All I
It
can
is.
say is that there are different ideas and theories, and different people have different information.
Uh-huh.
And so this is something I found fascinating that came out of that. But what I would say is there are, and I have in my other room, I have all my extraterrestrial texts. There are some excellent books out there that people can get that are like an encyclopedia of different known alien races and
Oh,
things like that,
I see.
that you can get real listings of the hundreds of different species that people are aware of, you know.
I don't think I have a
The
hundred different
ones,
species in my thing.
oh, do you? Okay.
I
Yeah,
don't
and
have
there's a
that many. I don't know of that many, so
yeah, I mean
maybe I
the
should
ones
get
that
that
I've
book.
had contact with, I've had primarily contact with the Pleiadians, Alpha Centaurians, the
Oh,
Arcturians, and with the ones I call the Tibetans, and then with this other society. And society is a very poor term for them, but I don't know what to call them because they come from this world is a terrible word for them too, but they come from
uh-huh.
this existence that is so
Yeah.
far beyond us. I don't know where either of those, the Tibetans or these ones. I mean, the only thing I think of when I think of them is pure white, because
Uh-huh.
they are just so far beyond in vibration and frequency. I can't even put them in words. They live in a world so different from what we live. And they are nothing like any of the others, like the grays and the things that we hear about, the reptilians, the mantids, and all these other things. I've had a few experiences with the grays as well. The
Uh-huh.
grays have come across to me as primarily mortal beings, in meaning that they're similar to us, which ironically makes sense if they are a future representation of us, that they would be mortal beings as well. So they are not like an advanced spiritual, you know,
Yeah.
civilization like the
Mhm.
Pleiadians, the Arcturians, or these other two that I would speak about. I've had contact with uh, the the civilizations that come from Venus,
Oh,
which are primarily multidimensional, but they actually travel in these like bluish purple faceted spaceships. They're not like cylindrical though. They're like this, and then so they're like a top to bottom, and then they're up and down at the top, and then they shoot out at the bottom, almost like a vase, but it's
oh
like
wow.
almost like an amethyst vase. And then I've seen and had
Amazing.
contact with the angelic there's an angelic type of extraterrestrial that comes off of Mars. But again, these are more multidimensionals.
Yes.
Because some of
I've
these
heard bad things
not
about the Martians
physical.
personally. So I've
Have
heard.
you? Okay, the ones that I had contact with were good ones.
Okay.
And then I've had contact with ones from Jupiter,
Okay.
but not a great deal. And I've had contact with beings that were from different stars and suns.
Ah.
And these are more, where they're not really extraterrestrials, these are more celestial type beings that are more from the angelic hierarchies. And they have to do
Okay.
with the evolution of our souls. So, my understanding and experience has been, because I've also had these beautiful experiences where I've been shown, you know, hundreds of civilizations coming in all at one time, you know, so I know that there are many, 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 many of them. It doesn't mean I'm going to need to have contact with all of them myself personally, but I know that they're there. You know what I mean? I know they're there, and it's really a cool thing. So they're there. And it was shown to me as being this great event around the time of the millennium, you know, when we switched from 1999 to the year 2000, the millennium, that it was a big transition galactically as well. And I've also been to planets where I have been in the presence, and I was at the Galactic Council also, where I was in the presence of hundreds of different types of extraterrestrials. But I don't necessarily have contact with each of them individually. So I'm just seeing them and wandering around and seeing that they are there. Another thing,
what about
too,
other
is
humans? Other humans that have also been traveling outside their bodies? Or do we normally talk about other humans?
Well, you do run into other people who are traveling out of body. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Were other people at
that happens all the time. Yeah, we see that all the time. That's very common. But one other thing I wanted to add to that is
maybe they're famous people that don't know that they're doing it because they don't remember afterwards.
Well, that becomes irrelevant in the spiritual realms. But just going back to the extraterrestrials, one thing that people are surprised by is that in the heavenly realms, in the heavens, there are extraterrestrials there as well as human souls. So when you go there, you're not surprised because it feels very natural. It's just that when you return, you realize, oh, wait a minute, there were extraterrestrials in heaven as well as human souls. And so this is one of the things that happens when the veil of forgetfulness comes over us as we become human beings, is we forget that this is just the way things are. These extraterrestrials are just naturally a part of existence like we are. Now, in terms of seeing other people who are perhaps well-known or famous on the earth, it does become completely irrelevant in the spiritual spheres, because it doesn't matter. What matters in the spiritual
perhaps they're
spheres
too materialistic to know that it's happening. So there's
I would not put that kind of a generalization on it, because you don't know what is happening inside any human soul. And whether someone is well known or not well known has nothing to do with whether or not they're materialistic or not.
I see.
Whether someone can be completely not well known and be totally materialistic, and it can be the complete opposite, you know. Someone can have billions of dollars and not be greedy at all, and someone can be living in a cave and have greed as a primary issue, and vice versa, you see. So we never want to put these generalizations, because it is the energetic truth that tells us what is actually true about something or someone energetically. But, you know, ironically, years ago, I wrote a set of books called Michael Jackson's Afterlife Experiences.
Great book.
So if you're interested in reading about something like that, you can read about that. which I followed his afterlife experiences. He came to me like 6 hours or so after his death. And for about a year, we followed his afterlife journeys. And then it was a very cool experience, very beautiful, watching what happened with him. So yes, I do see people sometimes who are well known. And I also see lots of regular, ordinary people that, you know, I'm called to assist in, just like you and I. Because in the end, we're all regular, ordinary people, whether people know who we are on earth or not. We're just human souls. So we're all working in the realms of evolution and creation to assist one another. And so regardless of what level of renown or non-renown we may have on earth, we're all just human souls seeking to assist one another in the evolution of our individual destinies and our greater destiny as a human family. So
Incredible.
You know, there can be a tendency to try to put people in these baskets, you know. So someone who's well known might be this, or someone who's not well known might be this, or and it just isn't that way. You know, what we find is the energetic truth about any individual soul is very unique, and it's something that can only be revealed to us by God himself. And it is only done so when our ego has so far been removed and our humility has been so deeply cultivated that we are able to see that soul clearly, only for the purpose of assisting them, not for the purpose of judging them or in any way that would be to use that information for anything other than love and assistance.
I see.
You see?
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much for visiting the Sky Report. It was fascinating to hear your takes on these mystical topics.
You're welcome. It was fun to talk to you, Logan. Thanks for having me.
That's wonderful. Thank you all, everybody, for listening and joining, watching. And please visit outofbodytravel.org and see some of her great books. It's been a fascinating talk, and we'll hope to maybe do it again in the future.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Logan.
Bye.